Okay, good afternoon and welcome back to the EduWeave Online Education Expo. We have another very interesting panel discussion lined up for you now, and we're going to discuss NEP and its impact on education. Just for the information of our panelists here, EduWeave Expo, we try to work with quite a lot of our teenage student volunteers, and two of our volunteers are here as part of this panel also. So let me hand it over to one of them, Shubhangi, to do the introduction of the moderator, and we will take it from there. Over to you, Shubhangi.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion where we're discussing about NEP. We're so glad to have you all here. I'm Shubhangi, a student volunteer, and we have a very dear Miss Sandhya Vishwan, who is the moderator of this panel. She is an educator for the 2 decades of her experience. She is the director of BSCI and of Madhpai Education and is an expert in early childhood. She is a Go-To expert for homeschooling in Bangalore. Sandhya is a homeschooling parent for 2 sons. She has been awarded multiple times by various education bodies for her contribution to parenting and early childhood education. She has the unique background of being an engineer and a psychologist. She also counsels parents on identifying education options for their children. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shubhangi. A warm welcome to everyone present here, as well as our eminent panelists. I'd like to introduce our panelists before I go on to the topic. We have with us Professor Rishikesh. Rishikesh is an associate professor at the School of Education, Azim Premji University, and also leads the Hub of Education, Law and Policy located at the university. He has over 20 years of research and teaching experience. He currently teaches at the postgraduate level at Azim Premji University. He has served on several government advisory committees formed to chalk out education roadmaps and is a member of the Karnataka Task Force established to implement the National Education Policy 2020. He writes regularly on educational policy-related issues in national dailies and magazines to make laws and policies accessible to everyone. His recent articles on learning during COVID-19 and the National Education Policy 2020 have been published by The Hindu, Deccan Herald, and the Indian Express. Welcome, Professor Rishikesh.
Thank you, Ms. Sandhya. Thank you very much.
Now, our next panelist is Dr. Chetan Singhai. Dr. Chetan B. Singhai has obtained his doctoral degree PhD from the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Indian Institute of Science. He completed his MPhil in Law and Governance at the Center for the Study of Law and Governance, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Chetan received his Master's in Political Science from the Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Chetan has worked as Assistant Professor at the National Law School of India University, Bengaluru, and St. Joseph's College, Bengaluru. He has been DAAD visiting faculty at the University of Würzburg, Germany. Currently, he has been nominated as member convener to the subcommittee to draft the implementation roadmap on governance and regulation in higher education aligned to the NEP 2020 by the government of Karnataka. Welcome, Dr. Chetan.
Thank
to
you.
the session on NEP 2020.
Thank you so much.
And its impact in education right now. So NEP 2020 last year made a lot of waves when it was announced. And I think even prior to that, there had been a lot of discussions on what was coming out and how would it be. I think with the advent of internet, the accessibility to NEP was more. And then there were a lot of articles on the interpretation of what NEP 2020 meant to the education system, and many are unaware of the previous policies that had come out earlier in 1986, and I think modified in 92. So suppose that what I also understand is that the NEP 2020 includes quality of education along with inclusivity, which was priorly basically education to be inclusive for everyone was the basic line that we would see. While in this, the quality of education was also an added point that we talk about. Now, coming to this, I'd just like to touch upon first and have some opening thoughts, maybe with Professor Rishikesh first, on how the NEP 2020, a quick cover on what it aims to bring about as a change to or suggestions for the early years as well as primary school. If you could just touch upon that, please, first.
Thanks, Sandhya. As in fact, many of you, would have been reading about, the key change that this policy is trying to bring about is in the curricular and the pedagogic approach, right? So the focus really is not about where the education is happening, and in what kind of an infrastructure that the education is delivered, but primarily what kind of education is being imparted. That really is the focus of NEP across the levels. In fact, later on, Dr. Chetan would talk about higher education. So when we talk about early years, if we look at the mainstream early years, you do see that there is a lot of, let's say, emphasis on what actually happens even in the later years in school, which is rote learning. From the very early years, children are asked to memorize, rote learn alphabet or numbers or tables. And so that really is what you see in the mainstream schools. Now, I'm slightly generalizing here because that is what you generally get to see. Of course, there are wonderful schools doing it the right way. And all that NEP is saying is that let's bring that onto the mainstream. So in that sense, NEP is not saying anything new, because it is saying that let us recognize what is required for good education. And there is a lot of it happening even within our own country. Let's bring that into the mainstream. Now, what would that mean for early years? That would mean, for instance, a lot of play-based learning in the early years, which we don't get to see in many schools. And so, in fact, NEP goes on to align it with the various researches that have happened with regard to brain development, and has said that early years will have to be really across 5 years and not just 2 or 3. So they speak about having an environment of this kind of learning from age 3 all the way to age 8, which corresponds to today's nursery to grade 2, wherein everywhere you have a play-based, activity-based learning approach, which is focusing on appropriate learning. And then, of course, it goes on to talk about how the next 3 years post that will have to be the preparatory stage, wherein literacy and numeracy is strengthened, not bring in content and impose many concepts, which again we see in many schools, because we as parents try and get to have our children learn more as early as possible, which as pediatricians and child psychologists and everyone, including educationists, would say is just not the way to go about it. And NEP is saying, hence, let's listen to these experts and align our curriculum and the way we do things in school to what has been found through research and what experts are saying. And so this is how NEP basically builds on. So let me pause here, because as you know, we can go on and on with regard to
right. So on that note, so many of us parents are actually worried, and we do try to develop academic skills early on, because we are looking at the goal of the board exam, which is like a looming thing out there, and we're working backwards. And many of them are fearful of what next if my child has not developed these academic skills at this stage. So in that, post the 10th and the 12th grade, children moving into universities here in India also have this hurdle of the competitive exams, which are planned in such a way where the academic goals are more relevant. If Dr. Chetan, could you first tell us what NEP has for the university level, which is something that I'm not even aware of, honestly speaking. And recently, Karnataka also, it's been in the news that the universities have to implement NEP 2020 with immediate effect. So which part of the NEP, if you could tell us first, what the NEP 2020 covers as far as university education is concerned, and what is the present, government's requirement for universities on implementation of 2020 in the university level.
Thank you, Ms. Sandhya. I think your question has been the work of the last 14 months. I think it's very difficult to capture every aspect of it, but I'll definitely flag what we call the meta level inputs. First and foremost, good afternoon, Rishi, and all the participants, audience, parents, and I like the way Shubhagi was introduced, the teenagers. They are the future of the NEP, and there's a lot of responsibility in them to understand and internalize the document. So having said that, one of the important feature of NEP 2020 vis-a-vis the previous policies is that the policy looks at education as a continuum. So in other words, I think, for example, now I'd like to link and respond to your question and hence I would not want to compartmentalize primary, secondary, post-secondary higher education. That is what NEP wants to undo. In fact, it's an antithesis to NEP, I would say. So that is one point. So that is education as a continuum. Whatever happens at early childhood education would have a wide and deep impact for higher education. To give an example, in grade 8th, for example, NEP recommends for multidisciplinary learning and teaching and hands-on learning and life skills, soft skills, so which actually becomes very critical for higher education. So, and going to the other part of what you mentioned in terms of this whole entrance exams and selection based. So if you actually see most of the higher education institutions where people tend to prefer, the institution where I was, the National Law School, the CLAT exam brings in so much of anxiety among students. So why is this whole thing happening? Because most of our school education is not geared up to meet to such sort of innovative thinking, as Rishi mentioned, making learning joyful and discovery-based learning, creativity. Because these tests are nothing but organized around your mental ability, reasoning, and thinking. I think that is where NEP makes a very, very strong set of recommendation and approach to see education as a continuum. And as a result of that, going forward, that's why NEP also puts in a lot of temporality timelines, 2040, 2035, 2042, etc. So that we see those kind of incremental changes. It is not just tomorrow we'll see a change, or it will not be like it will be in the next 1 year direct changes, but a few changes which are going to come. So those are the two big points. But I would like to urge here in this context, this whole coaching, training sort of things which is happening in country. Just take an example of civil services. Any undergraduate student, from any domain, any institution, anywhere in the country, is eligible to write the top-notch exam of the nation, that is a civil service. But why then he or she requires a training or a coaching is a very simple and a critical question to think. That eligibility-wise, they are supposed to be writing that examination, whether they are a student of at Chikodi in Belagavi district or in St. Stephen's College in New Delhi. I'm just taking at the spectrum. They're eligible, but why? Or the student of IIT or whatever. So why is that they have to go through this culture of coaching? How do we end this culture? Where is the root cause of? Again, it is in the school education, and then it has to translate into higher education. The last quick point there about Karnataka. Yes, it is a matter of being proud that Karnataka is the first state to make initial strides of implementation of NEP. But what we see now is mostly in terms of the curricular reforms that we are seeing at higher education level. They have proposed a set of prototype curriculum at a higher education level. Now institutions are supposed to read them, discuss, debate, and then again give feedback to this particular framework. And as a result of that, they are supposed to now kind of promote set of reforms, but again, keeping the spirit of NEP in the context, especially multidisciplinarity. So I think people like Shubhangi in the next few years would be now looking for a different type of universities coming through. Not the typical current ones like public state, private deemed, private state, and so on and so forth. So there will be institutions like who are focusing on research, who will focus on teaching, who will focus on combination of the both in terms of degree awarding. These are the three types of institutions that we are going to see, and that is where 8th, 9th, and 10th grade becomes very critical for the upcoming generation to think through. And NEP is getting ready for a kind of document which makes them ready for this kind of opportunity. Yeah, so these are my quick responses, but of course, if there are any follow-up questions, I'll be happy.
Yes, okay. So that was very interesting because one, we were unaware of what is happening at the university level. Most of our children are just entering there, and we are at the receiving end of what's happening. It is a little confusing. Also, the pandemic adding to that whole confusion. However, I find it very interesting that at the university level, these changes are being made. And we are also expecting, I think, high school would have to make these changes to be able to prepare these children for the new changes that are coming at the university level, which in turn also means that it has to boil down to the primary school as well as early years to build up on skills, as Professor Rishikesh was telling us earlier. It's numeracy and our literacy skills, basically. As a homeschooling parent, I've always advocated and believed, because we've been free to do what we want. By the age of 12, 13, if a child is capable of reading, writing, comprehension, and basic arithmetic skills, they can learn anything that they want, and they can make their own choices and decisions on their path, kind of like what the NEP 2020 is suggesting that we do. However, I also, having seen things in India, the implementation aspect, the training of the teachers is something that I'm not very sure how that happens and how the implementation will work without this training also. However, first I would like to, Professor Rishikesh, if you could just quickly tell us, in Karnataka, at least in the primary level, pre-primary and the primary. Pre-primary, I'm not very sure if there's been much changes even in the last year, but primary, are there any government level mandates on NEP 2020 being implemented that has been conveyed to schools?
So with regard to implementation, as Dr. Chetan was saying, Sandhya, we need to remember that NEP is a visionary document, which is talking about what kind of education should be in place in our country, at least for the next 20 years. And in fact, the time frame hence is almost 15 to 20 years. Some of these may take to actually have it in place, implementation. So, so this is the other unique aspect of NEP when you compare it to the previous policies. That one is it's visionary. At the same time, it's a very pragmatic document. It is not saying that all these changes will happen overnight. So even for early years, NEP is saying that in the next 9 years, that is by 2030, aligning to the Sustainable Development Goals, we should ensure that all our children from age 3 to age 18, that is pre-primary to grade 12, will have education, of the kind that everyone aspires for. So 100% enrollment in pre-primary is also a target 9 years down the line, because that is how far away we are today, with only about 50% really in pre-primary, including, when you include Anganwadi, we have tens of millions of children who don't get into any kind of formal learning environment before they come to grade 1. So with that kind of a reality, moving in to get the whole country enrolled in early years, NEP is providing a long gestation period, or rather, let's say the timelines are very pragmatic, right? Similarly, what Dr. Chetan was saying, the kinds of universities, what NEP is saying is at least by 2035, we should have all this in place. These kinds of universities, so that we can expect the gross enrollment ratio to reach about 50%, which today is only 25% for higher education, right? So when you come back to earlier, so in terms of implementation, there is nothing that is happening overnight. But as I told you, since the focus is on the curriculum and the kind of pedagogy to be in place, that is where the work is happening. So at this point of time, in fact, across the country, the states which are investing and putting in efforts, they are working on writing up position papers. So Ministry of Education from Delhi itself has given a list of about 25 topics on which the states can work to write position papers. States are inviting stakeholders. There are department people, there are people from associations such as yours, there are people from the NGOs and parents and teachers, everyone are coming together and writing position papers. So these are basically documents which will say as to what kind of a position the state has adopted, but keeping the NEP framework intact or in mind. You can't go beyond that framework, right? So keeping that, what are the kinds of positions that we take on these various issues? So this is the activity that is going on now across the country.
Okay.
And NCERT has given a deadline of February 2022 for all these position papers to be sent across to them.
Okay.
Once that is done, then they are going to also look at it, and they simultaneously are developing a set of position papers at the national level. So they're going to try and see whether they can pick a few things from the state position papers as examples, illustrations, and then they're going to come up with the national position papers and a national curricular framework. Now, the national curricular framework would then inform the states to develop its own state curricular framework with a few modifications. So this entire process is going to go on into the 2022. And hopefully 2022 academic year is where we will have the curricular framework and the curriculum as well, which would have incorporated a lot of the NEP principles. Again, I wouldn't say everything in NEP, a lot of it. Because over the years, the attempt is to have as much as possible of what NEP is saying into the curriculum. And as you rightly pointed out, we need the teachers also to get oriented towards the curriculum, to do the kind of teaching and learning at NEP is expecting. So all this is going to take time. So as the new curriculum is going to come, the teachers are also going to get oriented, their capacity is going to be built. And there is also a teacher education curricular framework that is going to come out, which is going to talk about how teacher education is going to happen, both pre-service as well as for those who are in service. Now, for instance, for those teachers who are already there, NISHTA, which is again from the Ministry of Education, is a training platform. I mean, one would say that it's actually a capacity building platform, because teachers can opt as to which of the domains or subdomains that they engage with, they would like to build capacity in and do the certification courses on NISHTA. And similarly, a number of universities, I guess Dr. Chetan will touch upon it, number of universities will start offering various certification and diploma programs for teachers, because teacher education is going to move into the universities. They can't now be standalone teacher education colleges, because it again goes in with this point that Dr. Chetan made of multidisciplinarity, which is very, very important for us to move towards knowledge generation. See, the vision finally of NEP is, can India once again become a knowledge generating society? And that NEP's key push is towards that once again. We were a knowledge generating society. The reason why we had 25% of the world's GDP just a few hundred years ago is because we were a knowledge generating society. Now, how do we get back to that position? So one of the things that we have to do is do some of these paradigm shifts of making things multidisciplinary, moving away from these single discipline institutions, right? Having lots of these hands-on approaches, lots of practical aspects coming in. So students having the choice to pick subjects of their choosing, rather than being forced into certain streams. I take science streams, I can't even think of history or music or anything. So these are the silos that we have to break, as Dr. Chetan was saying. And this can't just get broken at higher education. That's the reason why that continuum is important. We need to start getting our children to think that way in the early years. Right. So all the work, just to come back to your question, all the work that is happening is trying to figure out how do we get our young children to start thinking this way, to encourage that thinking. In fact, it's wrong to say how do we get them to think this way, because as you would know, they actually think this way.
I have a quick intervention.
Yes, yes,
If you accept my intervention at this stage, is it
yes.
okay?
I think
Yeah. Yeah. Now this is about the implementation. I think that is where the much of the discussion is happening because there are mixed perceptions with regard to as Rishi mentioned. I think the vision document is what the NEP is trying to set forth the vision. So how do you go and implement it? For example, again, just because I think the parents who are listening here, so to give a gist of it, one, it is, I would say, quote unquote, it must be made mandatory that everybody has to read the document. Otherwise, we'll get mixed perceptions, right? So, and that is obvious, and that NEP opens up the Pandora's box in a way of what we need to envisage from education system and where we are, definitely. But reading the document and becoming part of the document is very important. And of course, develop critique, not just accept everything. There's a for critique, but informed critique. That's one. But let me give other thing, which in the Niti Aayog, which is now a very prominent think tank or entity, in one of the meetings, one of the senior leaders who in the decision making mentioned, and which actually made me thinking that 70% of NEP actually does not need any sort of government order or circular or directions. Because what the NEP is talking about is what we are supposed to be doing, right? And we don't need anybody to tell us now that making learning joyful. Why do we want the government to tell us that we should make learning joyful? It is each teacher's responsibility, each student's responsibility, each parent's responsibility to make this joyful experience for all of us. For example, our discovery-based, creative, it's our responsibility. And similarly, as Rishi mentioned, Minister of Education on Thursday has notified 4-year integrated education program, which is called the IT, where this B.Ed program has now been made holistic and multidisciplinary by bringing the BA B.Ed, BSc B.Ed, and BCom B.Ed now as per the Gazette notification issued by the Government of India. So if we have to bring in those kind of reforms in education, as you rightly pointed out, Ms. Sandhya, I think teachers are very important. But of course, parents are equally important. Students are definitely more important. But at the same time, this teacher education is going to go through a lot of changes with this. I think if Rishi, if I'm not wrong, this was the first, while the committee was still discussing and making interim points, the NCT came out with a 4-year undergrad program. You know, it was the initial meetings of NAC next to the NACC in Nagarbavi is the NCT office. And the director was Dr. Panda, if I'm not wrong. So he attended the first few meetings, the third or fourth meeting. And then it was discussed that is a very important move that we need to make B.Ed program as a 4-year integrated program. And then the Gazette notification was issued in 2019. Now it has become a reality from Thursday onwards. So it will be as per the NEP's aspiration. That will be major change in a shift. So that is, I wanted to add a quick point, but I think I took long time. But please, I hope
No, we're looking for more clarity. As
Yeah.
you rightly said, I'm also somebody who believes when parents are either taking their decision, or I wouldn't say parents, community, individuals, we need to be reading it, the NEP 2020, before making our opinions known. Secondly, as you've probably seen, there's always somebody else's perception that's shortened and put out there on the net, part of which is just picked out from the NEP 2020 without context. And we maybe, I don't know, unfortunately, due to our background of education on how we take content, we do not tend to read everything in totality. We do not see the main goal and read everything in association with it. We tend to take one point from it and then start arguing about it. In fact, Professor Rishikesh, last time's our session was on the language. In fact, what the NEP 2020 was about, giving importance to the local language where required. It became a huge topic of debate in the Bangalore Schools group itself, where it seemed like local language is going to be forced, and in cities and towns where people are traveling, from various parts of the country or the world, It's going to be forceful learning of the language for children. And I think even now, the vision is always there. However, implementation, when it comes as steps, I understand that there's a process and it takes time. However, parents are looking at only what comes to them, right? This needs to be done. This is the change. The gradual change is not something that most people, and in fact, I also don't see that in educators unless they are forced by a rule. Like I totally agree that the NCF and the policy, there are so many points that can just be incorporated, just taken and implemented without having to be a rule. However, I think we as a generation are used to getting something as a rule and then implementing. That's the only way we work. To even think or open our minds, we need somebody to tell us that's the way you need to work. Otherwise, we're not going to hire you. So even for teachers. Now, I get it that at the pre-primary level, or the primary level, unless we build up on those skills, we will also be creating a next generation of individuals like us. And at first go backwards now, because this generation of high schoolers who've entered universities would require to be in that thought process, like you are saying that the universities are making those changes, but they're also these are also the set of students who've come from a very conventional academic content driven system. So how would we be able to help this particular generation, this group of children who are now stepping into university, where the change is being made or starting out, and there's suddenly this segue that has gone into multidisciplinary, and we're so used to thinking they have been preparing for the last, let's say, 5-6 years for this goal, and suddenly that's all changed. Is there like a bridging program to help this group? I know the next one, the primary years coming there would be fine in the next 8 to 9 years. But what about this present group that is at the threshold right there, Dr. Chetan? How is there something that's being done on that?
Yeah, I think you have already partly responded, is what I feel, that is NEP as a systemic document. It's not supposed to be read in parts. And in fact, I would use this platform to urge all of you, meaning those who are listening, and also telling to myself that the draft NEP document is the most comprehensive kind of document. That is draft NEP 2019 and the 2020 document also. I think when you read this text along with, it's like, keeping a dictionary. 2019 draft document is like a dictionary for reading this 66-page document, or maybe a thesaurus, or you can say whatever. But you get the rationale behind each policy recommendation, very well situated, contextualized, and it's itself a testimony of how education system should be, is what I could say. Because not that we were part of it, but it is that people have put in so much of thought process in organizing Rishi and his colleagues and all those people who have been part of it. It's very thoughtfully done. So that's one thing. So if you read this both document, investing 1 week of your valuable time, I think over 1 week, then I think you get a systemic perspective. So you're talking about inclusivity and equity and accessibility, which have been a perennial problem in higher education since independence. And it has got aggravated or rather compounded from the late 70s with various set of movements that organize the higher education system. And NEP definitely acknowledges it in many ways. First is to look at a category called socially economically disadvantaged groups, SEDG, which kind of brings majority of the population who are either deprived of accessibility or deprived of quality higher education in the various sense because of the socially economically disadvantaged set of reasons. That is one unique contribution of NEP. Second is, yes, bridge courses. Now, bridge courses are not recommended by NEP per se. In fact, they say that one, categorizing universities or higher education institutions as research intensive university with some teaching and teaching intensive university with significant research and degree awarding autonomous college. Now, let us say I will call them what you're referring to in this context of first generation learners, right? So 2020, we are seeing mostly urban population. We are seeing fourth, fifth, or third generation learners mostly. So the first generation, basically coming from the affiliating part. Now, what is going to happen is that is what the systemic perspective is. There is no specific mention about what the institution should do. Instead, they are being given autonomy. Now, each institution would become an entity by itself. Each institution should assess their local context, assess their own strengths and weaknesses and challenges, and so on and so forth, and opportunities, the SWOT kind of a thinking, and then come out with their action plan to bring this whole generation of learners to the kind of addressing their challenges. So hence, it should not be generalized. It should not be a nationwide policy per se to integrate this set of population, because each institution demands it. See, for example, as I said earlier, Bangalore City University has various colleges. They will have a different sort of target group as well as group who are joining them. To a college in, as I said, North Karnataka or near Yadgir. So each one has to come out with their own approach. That's why the autonomy comes. So NEP wants institutions to become more and more autonomous so that they can respond to their specific contextual sort of solutions or challenges that they're going to face. That is why I would say it is more in these lines rather than in providing quick fix solutions. Like, okay, you do this, but not keeping the context into mind. That is one of the uniqueness that NEP has brought in terms of autonomy to higher education institutions.
So what I'm hearing is it's not as content driven as it was all these years, and based on the local context, it can be developed. Sounds very similar to the IB program, especially this is done even in the PYP, which is the primary year program for primary school children itself. We've worked similarly. So it sounds very, very similar to that. So coming to Professor Rishikesh, is this similar? I mean, can this kind of thought process be implemented even in the primary levels, because it's being done in an IB program? And I also understand from the first set of sentences that the NEP 2020 says we are, as a country, trying to be or trying to bring about these global citizens, at the same time not missing out on our cultural base either. And of course, we are such a diverse country. So each state, or even within the state, each city, town has its own set of idiosyncrasies, if I can say that, and different culture, you know, which is the beauty of our country also. But we have certain skill sets that we need to build on. Is that possible? I mean, I've seen very expensive IB schools do that, but is that what we're aiming at and trying in the primary levels as well?
Yes, Sandhya. In fact, precisely that. If you look at the principles on which NEP talks about various provisions and various changes that we need to bring about, it is very aligned to IB. Because IB is a curriculum and it's among the most progressive curricula that we have in the world.
I think you have to abbreviate the ID for the larger.
Yeah. So International Baccalaureate as a curriculum is
Our
among
group knows that. Our group is aware. I did one on the boards just yesterday.
I was hearing it as ID.
IB, the
Okay.
IB program. That's the board.
Sorry, did we cut the comments? Please, Rishi, go ahead.
Yeah. So it is amongst the most progressive curricula, and NEP completely aligns to IB in that sense. If you look at the principles, but obviously, given the Indian context, there are a lot of modifications that we may require to IB. But then the foundational principles is very much like IB, and the kinds of skill sets, for instance, what IB promotes or tries to build in children is precisely what NEP is saying we should have in our curriculum, right? And so that is what is going to come in the curriculum framework. In fact, I'm quite sure of it. In fact, the most wonderful thing that has happened over the last 1 month is that now we have a task force for the curricular framework, and the same distinguished members who wrote the draft NEP, Dr. Kasturi Rangan, Dr. Sridhar, Professor Katimani, Professor Manjul Bhargav, all of them are there in this task force.
Wonderful.
So it is going to completely get aligned to what NEP is talking about, whatever the curricular framework that's going to come out from Ministry of Education as well. And so you will do, in fact, when the curricular framework comes out, you will see even more similarity with IB. Yeah.
Okay. Like you just said about the IB also, that it's progressive. It's just I wouldn't even say it's a framework. They're just very basic goals there. And even an IB school, like 5 kilometers away, will not be having the same content. I've also worked in not IB schools, CBSE schools, where they have used the IB program with the NCERT curriculum, making it interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary as well, especially in the primary years. I've worked in schools like that, but I've always wondered what next, because they're going to a regular content-driven CBSE middle years program. I've never seen the school, move beyond that to middle school, because I understand it was working towards the exams, the board exams. So it's not impossible. And as Dr. Chetan earlier said, even within our own Indian system, we've been able to implement all of that which is there in the NEP. I mean, nobody forced the school to do it. Nobody came out with the rule, but it just took the best principles. The NCF was there, the NCERT curriculum was there, and you could build around that with the skills. So it's not impossible, but I'm just again wondering, how do we implement it without being forced in a country like ours?
See, sorry, I'll just come in here. So NEP is very clear that if you force things, it's not going to happen. And that is why the point that Chetan was making, even at the higher education space, why is autonomy being spoken of? Because one can drive things, try to drive things mandatorily, but it will not happen. And that's what research tells, that's what history shows us. Right. So that's the reason why providing this autonomy, even for the higher education institutions, all that the higher education institutions have to put forth is an institutional development plan, IDP. And they're going to be, their performance is going to be measured on the promise that they themselves have made. But that promise has to be within this NEP framework. Right? Similar thing goes to the schools as well. In fact, when you have the curriculum framework, the NCF that will come out, it is going to talk largely about the kinds of skills that children ought to acquire over 15 years of schooling. And it's not going to be so focused on the content as it is currently. Right? So you see as to how is it that these skills are going to be acquired. Of course, there are some foundational principles that try and bring in as much practicum as possible, practical aspects as possible. Right, give students choices. In fact, what you see in MYP in IB, middle years program, is what is expected to happen in our middle years here. Now, as you rightly said, for all this to change, even the assessments have to change. Right. So which is why NEP is also talking about those changes in the assessment. And over the years, you're going to have modular exams. That is where we are moving. NCERT is going to come out with, or there is Parak, which is already there from NCERT, performance assessments. There is a national testing agency that has already been established. Now, all these institutions and agencies are going to play their role. It's not all going to happen overnight. They're going to start playing role. So for instance, you will have modular assessments for science level 1, level 2, level 3, as you would have in IB. And children who do science in their middle years or in their secondary years can just take these modular assessments, acquire credits, and get your school leaving certificate. So that is the model towards which NEP is moving us. It's not going to be a sudden change, as I keep saying. So we are going to move to a credit-based system, even at the school level. At the higher education level, already there is progress towards that, and maybe Chetan could add as to the academic bank of credits and all that that's happening at the higher education space. School education is also going to move towards this kind of a credit-based certification. So let's say 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, the 4 years of secondary, you have to get 120 credits, and you have to get minimum credits across certain subjects. And so that's the way that it's going to happen. So assessments are going to change. It's no more studying for those board exams. Now, moment that changes, it's much easier then to bring about your teaching learning environment changes, either in the secondary or even in the middle years.
I agree, and it's not going to be easy. And initially, I think there might be a little bit of resistance, but that's all that they can do. The mandate from the government can come. Professor Hrishikesh, you just mentioned that Dr. Chetan could throw some light on the implementation.
Sure. So, yeah, implementation part, as I said, yeah, if we all treat this as a law, then implementation ought to be coercive. If it is a vision, then we all will come together to implement it. So that's why I think we need to think about it as an aspiration for the nation, because that's how it has been framed. And I keep also agreeing to this fact that most of it we are doing, but we need to now make it as a systemic sort of practice, not like as one of the scholar in higher education in India who often cite, who's from US, Philip Alpach. He talks about he characterizes Indian education, especially higher education, as islands of excellence in sea of mediocrity. So the islands of excellence are the IIMs, IITs, and so on and so forth. In the sea of mediocrity are the majority of our public institutions. And he characterizes, and it's the right characterization, because the question is whether they wanted to be in the sea of mediocrity, or they are unable to come to the islands of excellence, and then it becomes sea of excellence in islands of mediocrity. I think it's a systemic sort of issue where the regulatory system, for example, it is very, very disempowering, right? It is not so incentivizing or empowering. They always see every institution with the same lens. There's a very good institution performing very well, but the regulatory system would like to curtail it to the extent, unfortunately, until date. So now NEP makes a lot of recommendations, or serious set of recommendations for providing what we call the light but tight system, right? So you have autonomy as long as you are transparent, you are disclosing publicly what you're doing on one hand, and you will be given autonomy. Otherwise, the system will be tight on you, in the sense there will be having a lot of checks and balances. That's one. With that comes the prominence given to autonomy. So autonomy is not just about freedom; it comes with a lot of accountability. So, like if we ask our children today or teenagers today to, you will have 2 days to do whatever you want to do. They'll be confused. What should I do in these 2 days?
True.
Do whatever you want to do, because they are so much used to timetable, so much used to classes which we scheduled. So, and that's what the COVID has taught us, that how do we organize ourselves and not somebody else organizing for ourselves. So that is why autonomy comes with a lot of responsibility. It is not a very simple game of getting freedom or being this one. So hence, institutions have to be empowered. And that is where there are these 3 types I talked about. And for students who are now getting into higher education, or who would be getting in a few years from now, there is an option of multiple entry and exit under the larger principle of flexibility and choice for students. So multiple entry and exit means that there's no label or question of calling somebody as a dropout. So there are some teenagers who feel very proud of being a dropout because they have some role models like Bill Gates and others. But I think socially, it's a very heavy sort of a label to carry. It has not yet become a norm for us in our social systems. So that's dropouts are not there. At least there is a choice. And she was mentioning about science students going to arts. But imagine the other way around. Our liberal arts and humanities students, like poor Rishi and me, who are into the social science, going against the societal sort of tide,
Expectation.
technical science and engineering science to medical science. We don't have a choice. We have to live in this sort of a vertical. So now NEP will bring in a lot of this kind of a choice where there's a flexibility and mobility for students. That is why there is something called as academic bank of credits. Again, the UGC has issued a gazette notification, and it's very much the best analogy I can think of is our debit cards that we use. We go to the ATM, withdraw it when you want to withdraw it. As simple as that. So it's a credits that you have earned over time, and it will be deposited in one of under your code or registration number and something. You can travel across the country to pursue your higher education. And for especially the equity component here, I remember distinctly in the committee's discussion why this academic bank of credit was also important was because our mobility, multiple entry and exit, was not just for quality of education or choice and etc. But there are many unfortunate set of women who tend to migrate with their spouse and they discontinue education also. And Bangalore is one such city where many have migrated and they could not continue because they have studied 2 years, but they could not complete their third year, and because they cannot have the same syllabus or curriculum or the board, and they discontinue. And then there is no motivation unless somebody really wants to take it up as a challenge. So now that is possible with Academic Bank of Credit. You can just transfer that credit structure from one state to other state and continue. So these are major changes, I would say. But the last quick point is about undergraduate education becoming research intensive. Undergraduate education. NEP also looks at how to capture young minds with creativity and innovation and invention by making it a 4-year undergrad program, where the 4th year is going to be also research intensive. And then they'll have 1-year masters and all those structural changes which are coming.
Is this also applicable to the professional courses?
Yes.
Because so far we've seen this as, a separate segment, professional courses, regular colleges, like you just said, liberal arts is one of the least considered, you've not been able to be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. So they also come. So can a student probably build in credits with a few engineering subjects and maybe arts, liberal arts?
Yes. Except the law and medical for now, because these are the two regulatory bodies who are yet to be kind of merged into the larger regulatory reforms that we are looking into. But yes, going forward, that is how it is supposed to be, that this whole professional, non-professional, technical, non-technical, like in school, as Shikesh would tell us, curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular is not going forward as a nomenclature to be considered. I think, yeah, these are the major changes that we are going to witness. And again, school education becomes important to make the best out of what are the changes that are coming in higher education.
I think, okay, we are almost running out of
if I can
time.
just add
Yes,
there
please.
To what Chetan said. See, you also asked this question as to there could be some students or parents quite anxious what's going to happen from next year, given higher education implementation is in the news and people are saying things are changing. Credit-based courses are coming in. And you were asking about the bridge course, right? So one, as Chetan said, bridge course is something that NEP stays away from because there can't be any short-term or immediate solutions. But one need not feel anxious at all. See, there is no need for anxiety if, for instance, an engineering student gets an option while doing engineering to study history, or a literature student gets an option to do something in science, right? Or to take up a course in engineering.
Right.
So there is no need of an anxiety. It's just that these children are going to be, or youth, in fact, at that level, they are going to be given this option, these opportunities. And one of the positives, if you look at, cognitive development, the positives is that our cognition is going to also improve when we are in this kind of a interdisciplinary mode, right? So we're going to have, in fact, better engineers if they are also looking at other subjects along with engineering. Similarly, better people, better communicators, better literature
Yes, absolutely.
scholars.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's why no, I mean, all that I'm trying to say here.
I know,
for the audience
I
is-
know. We probably, as I mean, as people who deal with other parents as well, it's something that we should be doing to reassure. I've been just being the devil's advocate here. I'm a parent. I'm also personally, I believe for my own children, the more options available, even in high school and later, their options of career are also much more wider rather than sticking them onto a stream at high school. It is always better to keep that open because you never know, changes, interests change, passions change. You might be passionate about something just as a mode of relaxation rather than want to take it up as a career. You might be really good musician, your child might be really good at music but doesn't want to be performing there, and he or she could also be very good at science and technical aspects, the sound engineering. There's so many other career paths which do mix these streams. And when we don't have the opportunity to give our children that, how would they be able to explore and even let you know that this is what we want to do? They're too young at primary years to be choosing what they want. I've seen parents saying, I want my child to be free. And as Dr. Chetan rightly said, autonomy, and yesterday even in our alternative education, the same thing was said, autonomy with the boundaries or with a framework and cues and guidelines on what they can be doing. You can't say freedom, go research doesn't mean go to Google. Research means to take the content, analyze it. We need to be having intelligent conversations. You can have a different opinion, but you need to have the reasoning behind that, right? I would enjoy that. So I think we need to build up that generation, and I'm really looking forward to the changes in our system, which partly are built by us as parents, demanding this. But I think that should change, and in the fact that parents' mindset, it's up to us to start orienting them, and as you said, Professor Rishikesh, that they need not be anxious. In fact, that is more liberating than pulling them down. Okay, so we are right now at 3. Thank you so much. And this is a topic that I would love to discuss further, and probably also have you, Professor Rishikesh has been with us. This is our 3rd discussion with him. Dr. Chetan, we look forward to having you more often. Oh, there's a question. Does NEP impact the entry age into schools? For example, is 3 years mandatory versus 2.5 years? Oh, this has been a question running the rounds in our group.
Rishi,
already answered it. Yeah, Chetan, what is it?
Please.
Yeah, that's the.
Want to respond to
So giving you a context, the age for admission to schools is a very hotly debated topic in our Bangalore Schools group amongst this way, that way, and with NEP, being clear on the age groups where they can start. The question is about, entry level to pre-primary level. Is 3 the mandatory age, or can it be 2.5?
So, I mean, there are no straight answers to this, right? But all that I would say, because this is more of a parent audience, is that we shouldn't at all be so concerned about this. If our child is just 1 month this way or that way and goes to a class lower than what you would want to, it's not of concern. And older parents, I think, Ms. Sandhya, you would also agree, at the end of 15 years, I mean, those wouldn't matter at all. And let us also remember that research is very clear that if a child is put, slightly at a younger class, it does better, right? Rather than push it to an older class when it's at that threshold. So let's say at 8, instead of pushing the child to a grade 4, having it at grade 3 is beneficial for the child, immensely beneficial. And it doesn't matter at all at the end of 15 years, at the end of 20 years, by the time you finish. So let us not worry, whatever that, date is today. For instance, 5 years, 10 months is the Karnataka.
5.5 to 7 years for grade 1.
Grade 1 in
as
Karnataka.
per the rule.
Yeah.
But most schools have their range in between this.
Correct.
On that point, also, what I've seen as a developmentally, especially those children who are at the threshold, their development can be either this way or that way. So maybe just as it is detrimental to push or put pressure when a child is not ready, it also sometimes works the other way, where they are in a class or a grade lower and not challenged enough. But that is also because our system is now content driven. But once something like the NEP or a program is set in place, it doesn't matter, because the skill sets for each child is developing at their pace, and you have the end of like 2-3 years before a proper, at least, assessment is done for that. Unlike now, where it is a yearly, and then this age factor of a month here and there might not be really as important as a parent thinks now. So
So
as
what
far
is
as
important
NEP,
here? Sorry,
sorry?
Sandhya. So what is important is to really look at, around the world and, accept that it is not important. It's not that it might not be important. It is not, important. And research shows it very clearly. And even it's about challenging, as you rightly said. If a child is not challenged, it's a problem. But, being in a grade lower than rest who've been pushed, it's much better to be in a grade lower. But of course,
yes,
need to
and
be
it can be
challenged.
done. Even the challenge for that particular child can be given in the same classroom. So it's not impossible. It's just that our system or our set of schools and pre-primary schools work with a program that thinks that every 3-year-old is doing this, every 4-year-old is doing that, while developmentally a 3-year 1 month and a 3-year 6 months, there's a lot of difference there. So the preschools which do work on individual development of a child and go by their pace, by 6 years they're all on par in the skill sets that need to be developed. So there's nothing to worry so much about it. But the question from the parent is NEP going to implement this in the schools and make it a mandate that this is the age? Because schools do claim that. They take it as a reason to say that NEP said this and NEP said that, because that's the only way to convince parents, or not not too many questions coming up. But yes, as you rightly said, it's about what is beneficial for the child that we need to be looking at.
And just one thing, let's not blame NEP if something like that gets done, because it's not about NEP. It's about using NEP excuse and driving home some rule which a state may think, wants to do. But NEP is very open about it. NEP's only concern is the learning happening as per the child's developmental needs, as you were pointing out.
And unlike what many parents or people think, NEP is not an act or a rule. These are just suggestions that can be taken and created. And as Dr. Chetan first pointed out, Karnataka was the first, one of the first states to implement, even at the school level, when NEP 2020 was announced. Y'all had a committee that had formed right then, right, Professor Rishikesh?
That's true.
Yes, and we had started working on that aspect. So I think changes can start somewhere, and then it kind of builds and spreads around the whole country. And
yeah. So I'm not getting into semantics here, but yes, most can. But then what, as NEP advocates, both Chetan also would agree. We feel that we should go in the direction that NEP is talking about. A lot of time has been invested. A lot of very intelligent people have worked towards creating this. And so there shouldn't be this question mark unnecessarily, unless we have invested and you actually have a certain point of critique. Otherwise, as educationists, you will see that there is really nothing which is off. And it is all about building an Indian society that we can be proud of. And that's the reason why we want the kind of education that NEP is talking about.
Absolutely. So we've run out of time. We've overshot also, I think. Thank you so much once again, Professor Rishikesh and Dr. Chetan. And I look forward to more such sessions from you on various topics, not just the NEP. We've been talking too much on that, education related. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks. Thanks, Shubhangi. Bye-bye. Thanks, Sandhya. Bye, Rishi.
See you, Chetan. Bye-bye.